Okay, we expect more people to join. Please do stay on mute unless you want to say something. Okay, so that's the housekeeping, I think. Right, for those of you who don't know me, so my name is Andrew Hallam, and I'm the General Secretary of Aspire. For those of you who don't know Aspire, so have a look at this slide. So these are our members. So many of the world's leading corporations, really a robust network of international and local companies as well. I don't know if we've got another slide, which is like our associate members. Right, associate members, you know, companies providing support services. So that's Aspire. Aspire, of course, is not just companies, it's the people that work in those companies. So I imagine that most of you on this call are in fact members of Aspire and members of the network. Together, we support each other. That's what today's about the development of our sector. I mean, particularly in Krakow, now employing over 100,000 people. So our aim with this webinar and with all webinars, actually I'm not sure if we call it a webinar, it's a session, right? I mean, it's not, we want it to be interactive, is to draw on the expertise and the experience of our member companies. Today in particular, State Street and Zurich. With the idea that really a rising tide lifts all boats. We can all learn from each other. So, you know, we'll be hearing from Monika and from Ruth, and then after that we'll be opening it up and we'd like to listen and hear what you've got to say. Okay. Okay, so maybe this is the agenda slide. So the introduction from myself, you've heard most of that already. Then we'll move to Monika Jankowska-Rangelov, who today is going to be talking about women versus coronavirus, how the pandemic has changed our lives and our work. And then Ruth from the Zurich Foundation, not only about this, but also about how a local grant is meeting local need. And then, as I say, we'll move to a Q&A and an open discussion. We've got 70 minutes left to do that, right? So quite a tight schedule. The other thing to say is when I say your experiences, so the other thing we want to do today is we want to use Mentimeter. So I'm sure many of you know Mentimeter. What it is an app, a mobile app, whereby we can do live polling. So we will ask you some questions, and you will be able to tell us your answers, and we will aggregate the results. Okay, so that's great, Dorota. That's great. In terms of what I see on my screen, I see a different question. Is that just me? Okay. No. Okay, I see the right question. So the question is, where are you working today? So I'm working at home, I'm in the office, I'm having a day off. Nobody has a day off. Oh, somebody is having, and so I applaud the person that's having a day off and is on this call. I really do. And that's 2%, 49 people have answered, so that's one person. Okay, I'm good at maths. Okay, keep going, keep going. Look, it'd be great if everybody on the call could do that. So we've got 122 people on the call, so we'll wait a little while, okay? So we've had 66, okay, just over half have answered, right? It's climbing. Keep going, please. So I should do it too.
Can you please show the code once again, please?
The code is at the top of the slide.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. That's terrific. I mean, you know, keep doing it, right? So that's quite interesting because we've been running this throughout the entire period of the pandemic. And that is the highest number in terms of the number of people working in the office that we have seen. Okay, I know that this week and last week Many companies have moved to a kind of a phased approach of asking people to come back into the office, I think mostly on a voluntary basis. So that figure, I suppose, has climbed from what we would have seen before the summer, which would have been about between 5 and 10%. So it's now gone to nearly 20%. So that's quite interesting. Can we have the next question, Dorota? Okay, all right. Look, this is all anonymous. Okay, we're just doing this really to test the tool. Okay. Okay, what age group do you belong to? That's me. I just did that one. All right, that's the 50 plus. Okay. I didn't expect to be quite out on my own in that way. I'm quite interested in this though. So 31 to 40, right? So when we generally do what's the average age within the industry, it's generally under 30. Of course, we're not as young an industry as we once were. We've been going for 10, 15 years, right? And many of us have been doing it all that time. So I suppose that's why we might be in that 31 to 40 group. I think it probably also suggests that there are probably more managers in the call today. Okay, brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Okay, next question. It's just to get a sense of who's on the call. This one's slightly more difficult because I think it's an open question. Dorota, can we go to the next question? Okay, so here you've got, it's open text. How do you identify yourselves in terms of gender? So, you know, here, the size of the text will tell you in terms of the answers, right? So, I mean, I suppose it's not surprising that female and woman is much larger font, but it's good to see there are some men on the call and not only myself. Okay. Okay, brilliant, brilliant. Now let's move to, I think we've got one more question. Is that right, Dorota? Next question. Okay, so this is another one, open one, just to get a sense of what companies are on the call. I'm not surprised to see Aon, I'm really not. Zurich, State Street, CBRE, Pega, TE, EQ Tech, Heineken, Genpact, oh my goodness, IBM, Hayes, Brown Brothers, Universal Investment, Jacobs, Cisco, Oanda, Euroclear, Backbase, Verita, HSBC, Mindtree, Amway, Autodesk, Capita, Curate, Cathay, Sadkowski, Rise, Kinarps. Brilliant. Keep it going. Keep it going. No, okay. All right. Look, that was just an experiment to see who's on the call. So now we all know. Okay, we're on the call. We're on the call, guys. And thank you very much. All right. So look, at this point, and I think we're going to do some more Menti, but this time it's going to be with Monika. So thank you. And let's move then to Monika Jankowska-Rangelov. Monika, what are you going to talk about?
Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, everyone. My name is Monika Jankowska-Rangelov, and today I'm representing State Street. I'm working for State Street as Inclusion, Diversity and Equity Head for the EMEA region, working on a daily basis with 9 European locations, but also cooperating with other regions, as you can imagine, across the world. So APAC and Americas are also our peers, working and executing on a daily basis our IDE strategy, mainly towards our employees, so our colleagues internally, but also cooperating with partners, organizations, and also universities, as you can imagine, many different institutions externally. So today I will be presenting you with the results that we've done research together with Gazeta Wyborcza. And I just wanted to mention to you that it is one of our really key projects in terms of focus on gender. We strongly believe that still we need to continue the conversation about gender in our organizations and about female leadership, because there is still a huge space that is underestimated in terms of the role of women in business, but generally also in the society. So I will present you with the results of, and we can start with the first slide. Actually, all started in 2020, where High Heels and High Heels Jobs, which is the journalist platform in Poland, together with State Street Bank Polska, launched this, for us, very socially important project called Fearless at Work. In Polish translation, it would be Nieustraszona w pracy. And we wanted to emphasize the importance of courage, strength, setting authentic goals, consistency in action, and mutual support for women who still have to fight to be treated on an equal rights with men in the labor market. This year's edition of Fearless at Work has been based on research that you will see in a second. And the research was done on the professional situation of women during a pandemic time in the context of losing, changing, or seeking job development, mental health, or women mothers who had to combine work with childcare. How we did the research, it's quite important, that it was a telephone survey conducted by Kantar, which is quite well-known organization. And throughout February and March this year, the research was done on a nationwide representative sample of over 1,500 people aged 18 plus. There was also additional sample done on women, around 1,000 interviewees, and we were also checking with those that have lost the job, and it was a group of 100 people. I would like to show you, if we can go back with one slide. I just wanted to show you actually more closely let's say the areas that we looked at closely. And you know, it's very important because it just so happens that disasters always hit social groups the most, who and without it have been uphill. So knowing this, we really wanted to see how the coronavirus pandemic, which has been going on for more than a year now, changed women's lives in Poland. And as you can see, we have really done and performed lots of questions going deep into different fields of women presence and their life, not only focusing on work, but also their social roles, as we will see in a second. And if we can move, please, to the next slide, you will see the first statistics. And I just wanted to highlight that the time of the pandemic has had a significant impact on the labor market. We all know that, right? On the one hand, there have been layoffs in many industries. Some of these, for example, employed mostly women. And on the other hand, many companies and even entire industries have switched to remote work, like our sector, which also affected the entire home life, of course, division of duties and relations at home. Another aspect resulting from the situation of the labor market is the decline in salaries in some industries and some companies. Apart from the anxiety related to getting sick, many people were concerned about the future and their financial stability due to generally uncertain situation in the country and in the world, apparently. The home life, as well as the work of parents, mostly parents of younger children, taking into account even our age average, is greatly influenced by, was greatly influenced by remote learning of children. And we know that, right? The pandemic also changed everyday life due to freezing of certain industries and areas of life, even like entertainment, culture, gastronomy, tourism, etc. the time of the pandemic is, in a sense, a time in abeyance. The way of spending free time has changed. Some people have more free time and had to organize it differently. In our study, we focus on how the pandemic affected women's lives on many dimensions in terms of work, household chores, relationships, mental and physical well-being. People with higher education also work remotely. It's interesting that over 53% of those interviewed, at least partially, were working remotely. And among those with primary and vocational education, the percentage was around 6%. So as you can imagine, it was quite a homogeneous group that was and is currently as well working remotely. And remote work is the domain of large cities, 45% in cities of over 500,000. With smaller cities and towns and villages, of course, the presence, remote presence and remote work was, much less. And what's interesting is the fact that women more often work remotely, but also more often the preferred form is working outside the home. So mainly in the workplace. As for women, remote work often entails additional responsibilities. They have never been switched off while working from home. For example, remote learning of a child. And if we move to the next slide, I will show you how actually our interviews responded to the question of sharing duties at home. So a significant proportion of women say that both before and during the pandemic, they mainly engaged in household chores, especially cooking and cleaning. Men have a different view. Systematically less often than women declare that it is mainly a woman in the house engaged in cooking, cleaning, and daily shopping. So despite these differences, statements by both men and women show that the pandemic has not significantly changed the distribution of household chores. So we had to continue. On the other hand, we are aware that most working women and working remotely were also doing the other obligations and duties at home simultaneously that mainly impacted their well-being and mental condition. If we move on to the next slide, I will show you the remote schooling aspect. Of course, not all of us on the call are parents, but apparently more than half of working parents, which would be around 55%, and 48% of those women say that remote learning of a child had a negative impact on their work. And 41% of parents say that it hasn't had any impact on their work. So rather, most of the people felt impacted. Men are more likely than women to say that the involvement of both parents in remote learning was the same. Women, on the other hand, were more likely to think that they were the main involved in the remote learning of the child's children. So it's a really interesting observation that we did on the basis of the research. And if we move on, I will tell you that when it comes to childcare before and during a pandemic, the image drawn by men and women is also different as a remote learning. Men are more likely to say that the distribution of childcare has been and is equal. Women, on the other hand, are more likely to say that they are the main childcare workers. So, it's like, my impression coming out of the research was that, we have our own very individual perspectives involved in the research. But if we move on to slide number 8, I'd like to draw your attention to the aspect of finance and expenses. In the case of 55% of the employed, wages remained unchanged during the pandemic and decreased among 23%. of the all interviews, right? There are also people, every fifth working, whose salary increased during the pandemic. More than half of those who lost their jobs and are not now working during the pandemic decreased their wages. The lowest risk, though, of salary reduction was in women with higher education. In the case of men, wages increased more often during the pandemic. That's also interesting. People with higher education, around 80%, and the oldest, over 60, that constituted 82% of those that said yes or rather yes, more often believed that their current financial situation is stable. However, there is no correlation between the size of the place of residence and the sense of financial stability. During the pandemic, men were more likely than women to spend money on their own hobbies, technology equipment for remote communication, and the purchase of furniture and home furnishing or interior design. That's very, again, interesting. If we move on, I wanted to show you how we actually spent time during pandemic that apparently had a greatly influence how we were functioning and how we were spending our time. Well, it seems that this time now more than before the pandemic, 33% spent less time during pandemic on our hobbies, and 27% had less time to develop and retrain ourselves. 29% of people with high education and 31% of cities over 500,000 during the pandemic spent more time working. And we also realized that, I guess. However, among people aged 35 to 44, 36% spent free time with children, more time with children, and within shared entertainment. So the situation caused by the pandemic had also a little bit of a positive impact on some aspects of life. The vast majority of people appreciated their life situation. More than half of them had more time for themselves, and 31% of women and 21% of men felt satisfied with the change of the mode of functioning. So actually they really liked the way they were operating remotely. And if we move on to almost the last data, I wanted to emphasize that pandemic had a great impact in terms of course, physical well-being or health condition. 27% of men and 36% of women suffer from some chronic disease or disability, those that were taking part in the research. Among people over 60, around 47% of men and 57% of women had a chronic disease or disability. So as you can see, the older we become, the more chronic diseases we might acquire. Despite the difficult situation, deterioration of mood and sleep problems, only few people used a psychological help or psychiatrist during a pandemic. Before the pandemic, women experienced more like sleep problems, and this was reported by around 36% of them. During the pandemic, this problem was even more serious in group of women, as you can see on the slide. And the last bit of data will show that actually 46% of women and 25% of men felt helpless during the pandemic. It's quite a significant number, especially taking into account the gender aspect. Women much more often than men had concerns about health, future, or financial situation. According to the majority of women, and it was around 78%, and men, that was around 73%, the pandemic didn't affect their relationship with a partner. So, however, there is a group of people who say that pandemic has improved or worsened their relationship with each other. People of the age of 35 to 44 and living in cities with more than 500,000 say that the relationship improved during the pandemic. 10% of Polish women in relationships live in so-called distance family. That's also quite important number. Among families living at a distance, the partner most often goes away for a longer period of time. And this is around 70% of the cases. And 84% of the answering definitely yes and yes of women living in a family remotely believe that couples who live together find it easier to endure a pandemic. So I think it's enough in terms of the numbers. So I just wanted to show you the overall conclusions from the research. So the most important information is that, again, women were found to have suffered much more than men during pandemic, as many as twice as in terms of women have lost their jobs. And it is mainly women who are involved in remote education of children at home. And they complain that it made them very difficult to combine these two obligations. This is a fact that women are cleaning and cooking and doing most of the household chores. And they also suffer from insomnia mainly than men. And it has worsened over the last almost 2 years now. Of those surveyed, 65% of men and almost 45% of women currently work. Men are more likely than women to work in a form of self-employment and run their own company, employing other workers. The pandemic hit women more. Younger people were more likely to lose their jobs during the pandemic, and those with primary or vocational education. Around 10% of these people were strongly impacted and lost their jobs. And of course, the pandemic has left its mark on many areas of family life, social life, the economic situation, the labor market. It hit those groups that had a difficult situation before. So mainly single women, remote families, people with various diseases or disabilities. The pandemic brought about fear of falling ill and fear for the health of oneself and those of loved ones, but also fear of losing a job, fears related to the future and financial situation. Many people lost their jobs. Many people's financial situation got worsened and their salaries were reduced. People who lost their job in a pandemic but found a new one still feel that their financial situation is not really stable and they are concerned about the future of work. Financial security, was also a challenge in the fight with COVID. What the pandemic brought about is time spent together and with loved ones, and it was reflected in the research results as well. What's, I think, the major positive outcome of the pandemic is that the majority of people declare that they now appreciate their life situation much more than in the past. You can read more information and get familiar with the details of the research under the link that we are presenting at the moment. I'm sure it will be possible to get the link as well after our meeting today and the session. We wanted to show you actually that the Fearless at Work as a project is a very important initiative for us, and my colleague Anna will tell you more in a second on this initiative. I just wanted to mention that we as State Street do execute lots of great initiatives based on the working employee volunteering hours, that we have 4 days a year for each employee. And our staff is engaged in different initiatives and projects executed with our partners. I will just mention 2 examples that we did with Stella Virium Foundation. And these were Barriers Breaking Opportunity project and also Helping Hand. And throughout this project, we helped almost 80 beneficiaries that were highly impacted by COVID. They lost their jobs, and they constituted mainly that 10 to 20% of the group, the most impacted in COVID. So they lost their jobs, they lost their stability, financial stability, and their mental well-being. And through the project initiative and involvement of the employees at State Street, and also many specialists like psychologists, like lawyers, like counselors, all these people managed to get back their lives, train, for example, their recruitment conversations, and get back to the working market or labor market successfully after 2 years since the pandemic started. So probably not all of them, but most of them definitely were getting back their lives. And all of the beneficiaries really appreciated that the companies and private industries invest in people that theoretically are not their clients, theoretically are not even their default talent pool, but also appreciating the fact that companies want to change something around us and want to make a positive impact in our society. So, and I'm very grateful that we could do that. And now I will hand over to Anna Szabowska-Walaszczyk, who will present you with the Fearless at Work project as such, along with the support that we did for Women's Support Center in Gdańsk. So Ania, if you don't mind, over to you. And of course, if there are any questions to the survey and to the data that we presented in a second, after Anna's performance, I'm happy to answer any of the questions coming at the end of the session. So thank you from me, and Ania, over to you.
Hi, thank you all. Thank you, Monika, for sharing again those results. I think it's great that we can share those with bigger and bigger groups, because each time we see it, it makes really large impact when we actually see those results, as we live in this specific corporate world when things seem to be a bit different than in the other whole of our society. But coming back to the Fearless at Work Nieustraszona w Pracy project, so this is something, as Monika mentioned, that we have launched in 2020 with High Heels, so Wysokie Obcasy, Gazeta Wyborcza. Project is inspired by the statue of Fearless Girl. I hope most of you are familiar with the bronze statue of Fearless Girl that was set next to the Raging Bull at Wall Street and then moved next to the New York Stock Exchange, showing the impact of women in business and leadership. So this was actually sponsored by State Street Global Advisors, one of State Street arms or branches, you'd say. And in 2019, we had the replica of Fearless Girl visit Poland, and this kind of launched many different initiatives, including the Fearless at Work. So in 2020, we did this whole social campaign about power of women in the business, in the society, which included more than 30 articles published as a series of interviews with impactful women, 7 webinars, panel discussions, also connecting women from politics, economics, business, education, different areas of our social existence and presence. to discuss, share best practices, give tips for organizations or for women themselves. And this year, we definitely wanted to continue that activity, but we're concerned, we cannot just talk like we did last year, right, about that, especially in the COVID situation. So that's why we decided to do the research, to actually get more insight and to make sure that any activity that we do will be targeted at actual needs. That's why the second phase of the campaign this year is a Fearless Academy. So it's a series of upskilling webinars dedicated to women or anyone who would sign up for those webinars. So I think we had 3 or 4 so far. There are a few more coming this year. Again, there are articles in Wysokie Abcasy that perhaps you were reading, and a series of podcasts at Spotify. So there's a lot happening in that space.
Okay. Anna,
yeah.
sorry. Can I kind of move us on, because I'm just mindful of time, and maybe at the end we can come back again, because I think people will be interested to know how maybe they can get involved, if they can get involved. But let's come back, if we may, at the end. I just want to thank you, because we're going to move on to Ruth now at the Zurich Foundation. One thing we were going to do before your session, Monika, so this is live, all right, so things do go wrong. I'm not saying this is wrong, it may even be fortuitous. We were going to ask some questions before you started. We're going to ask them now. I don't see why not. So maybe let's do that. So if we could go back to our mobile phones, and this is to try and understand how we, as a group on this call, how we might vary from the survey itself. So the question is, what impact has the pandemic situation caused in your life? Okay, if you could bring that up. I'm going to ask Dorota now. Is it possible for people to answer? Okay, you've got 2 answers that you can give, okay? So I'm being quiet because I'm entering my own. Anxiety, okay. Work from home, obviously. Anxiety, more stress, loneliness. Sorry to pick out the negatives there. I can see things like increased fitness, health issues. Some people have put less stress, more time for family. There's a whole range of different kind of impacts I think we can see. Monika, did you want to comment at all?
Yes, absolutely. So as we can see, there were lots of emotions and feelings, as we can see. Mainly in terms of emotions, they were quite negative. But when it comes to the changes of the way we were functioning, I would say it was like 50-50 in terms of positives and potential challenging situations that we faced. As we can see, except from anxiety, stress, there were positives coming like digitalization. Many of the jobs that had never been digital in the past, they suddenly had to become. Many people have learned how to be more flexible, how to use phone more effectively, and lots of businesses mainly became much more modern, I would say. Also among the institutions that we would never expect. So we can see that there were lots of emotions involved and the conditions and perceptions how we were going through the pandemic. But it, again, as coming from the research, it was showing also positive outcomes. Of course, many people have been experienced by personal tragedies, losing the family members, friends, sometimes colleagues, and it's been definitely devastating for many of us. On the other hand, through those experiences, for those that survived or even are not so impacted personally, they have learned and understood how important the life is, and we definitely started to appreciate what we have much more. So this this confirms the research results.
Thank you, Monika, because we've got a couple of more questions here. So what feelings does the pandemic situation evoke in you? So Monika, this was your question. So what from you could talk behind the question. What are you asking people to put in there? Give some examples.
I would say that we've seen lots of examples in the previous question as well. So yeah, this is the most common answer, right? Like anxiety, fear, but also hope, as we can see. Of course, all of us were stressed. All of us didn't know actually what will be the future, how it will change, what it will bring. So the frustration at the moments of the lockdowns, or at the moments where we were all locked and without really any feasible future or improvement coming, anger, tiredness, fear, again, fear was very present. And generally the impact on our mental health, mental well-being. One of the results of the survey was showing that we were working more. Those that were privileged to work remotely, they were really spending many more hours at work, delivering to the maximum extent of whatever we could, just to balance on the all instability of the market. So I think it was really a unique experience for everybody, and we will definitely take it.
Thank you. And I think we've got one more question. I think these are really helpful, right? And we will distribute the whole presentation afterwards. So what, if any, positives? Again, over to you, Monika.
As mentioned, some of the industries and institutions got a little bit modern. They digitalized, they became more communicative. Suddenly we managed to optimize some of the processes in different companies and industries, sometimes closing doors for the external visitors helped or has given the way that we could operate without involving even our end clients so often. So reductions, cost saving, and many other discoveries that we did on the way how we were changing our operating modes. And I think this is learning, this is experience that all we got as organizations and as people.
Very, very interesting. So remote work is a positive, right? It's standing out there in the front. Remote work, flexibility, more time for kids, more sleep. I'm not sure about more sleep, because it's very interesting, isn't it? You see that for some people it's more sleep, for some people it's less sleep, right? It's kind of polarized, a lot of us, I think. Or not necessarily polarized, I mean, there are just lots of different kinds of responses all over the place. Okay, I think we need to move on, if we might. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for participating there. I'm going to hand over to Ruth. I think you're going to start with some questions as well, though, Ruth, right?
Yeah, I certainly was. There's a few more questions on Menti.
Okay, so if I could say to Dorota, could we bring up Ruth's questions? Is that okay? Right, okay. So, okay, right. So that's the question. Ruth, do I hand over to you? Yeah?
Yeah, that's absolutely perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, the question we're asking is how best can companies support social equity? So we have our 4 options: workplace policies, support for volunteering, lobbying and education. I think this will be interesting to see the results, because obviously we saw earlier the range of companies represented on this call. So it'd be great to see how you feel companies can support social equity. Lovely, lots in the education space we can see there. Amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, no, so yeah, absolutely brilliant there in terms of education coming out in the majority and on the top. And I assume what we're talking about there is education around the issues that people within your communities and within your locations are facing. So yeah, thank you very much for your views on that one. And the next question. Companies have a role in promoting social equity. Do you agree with this statement? So we're asking you on that spectrum whether you strongly agree all the way down to strongly disagree. So how much do you agree with the statement companies have a role in promoting social equity? Interesting, lovely, thank you. Okay, again, the majority coming through on that. I strongly agree. Just had to double check I was looking at the right bit there. Yeah, I strongly
we still have 100. We have 130 people on the call, so we're kind of half of the people have said something. So keep giving your answers, yeah.
Because yeah, if everybody responded, it could very much tilt the other way.
It could, but it's like the exit poll of the general election. I think we know the answer already. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely, and I'm going to speak to you a bit in my presentation about how we at Zurich try and support social equity. And then our final question, I believe this popped up earlier, so that might be why there's quite a few answers in there already. So in March 2020, the Centre for Women's Rights, CPK, reported an increase in calls to their helpline for victims of domestic violence. So that was the first month, I believe, where most of the lockdowns had come into place across Europe and things. So what percentage do you think that increase was? And I will give you the answer to this in a second. So yeah, still going quite high, quite a few people going for that 40% mark. That is quite a high increase. And bearing in mind, again, this was just month one of the quite stringent lockdowns, March 2020. Conscious of time.
So let's go with that. Let's go with that then, Ruth. All right.
So actually, the increase in calls was 50%. So within 1 month following lockdown, there was a 50% increase to their helpline for victims of domestic violence. Again, as Monika pointed out in her presentation, the pandemic really did hit those individuals that were vulnerable already, that were already in vulnerable situations. And I think that is a testament to that particular piece of information and data, that just in 1 month, calls increased by 50%. Thank you very much, folks, for your input. More than happy to move on to my presentation, if that's okay with you, Andrew, and everyone.
Okay, I believe your slides are coming.
Perfect. So yeah, hello everybody. I'll start talking again. I'm quite conscious of time, and I think it would be really important to get to the discussion piece and the question and answers at the end of this session. So my name is Ruth Adamson. I am the Regional Engagement Manager for EMEA, so that's Europe, Middle East and Africa, for the Z Zurich Foundation. Our main aspiration as a foundation is creating a brighter future together for vulnerable people. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit about the foundation and how we go about trying to achieve that aspiration. And then I'm going to talk to you about the local grants that we have in Krakow with CPK. And that will show you, as Andrew described earlier, a local grant for a local need. So what is the Z Zurich Foundation? So we are the main vehicle by which the Zurich Insurance Group deliver on its global community investment strategy. Lots of long words there. The Z Zurich Foundation primary aims are to support a fairer, more open and sustainable society, really by empowering vulnerable people within its communities to better protect themselves from risk and to adapt and thrive in a rapidly changing world. I think we could all agree that COVID brought about a lot of rapid change. We could see that in your answers to the Menti questions, not just your emotional responses to that, but also the responses, and as Monika mentioned, digitalization, remote working, ways that businesses and companies, and not just communities, really had to, within a day's notice, absolutely, completely transform how they operated. So the foundation focuses its efforts on 3 powerful and relevant topics of today's societal challenges. So the first one is adapting to climate change with a focus on adaptation and resilience. We also have well-being, so focusing on prevention and early intervention. And then we have social equity, and that is, as I mentioned, a real focus on empowerment of those that are vulnerable within our societies. On the next slide, just goes into a little bit on how we try and enact that. So what we're trying to do is really equip Zurich employees to become what we call activists in their communities. So that is with them really engaging, not just through maybe 1 day a year volunteering, but really engaging with causes that they're passionate with. So we bring together non-governmental organisations and governments, businesses, as well as local heroes or champions, as we call them, to work with those that are most in need. So by championing the champions and together looking at the bigger picture in all its complexity, we have a better chance of addressing society's most pressing issues. We tend to call these within the foundation coalitions of the willing. And a session like today, and obviously Aspire and State Street, bring together those with the similar views, the data, the expertise, and create a coalition of the willing that can generate positive impact. So there are several ways that we address these needs. And as I said, they are linked to our 3 pillars that I mentioned from the previous slide. So the first one is our Flood Resilience Alliance. So that focuses on finding practical ways to help communities in developed and developing countries strengthen their resilience to flood risk. In 2020, we also included a COVID response mechanism within our disaster response donation pot, and that was really to work with charitable partners to ensure that they could adapt to the changes they faced in the new COVID environment. We also encourage employee engagement. So it was interesting to see how many of you in that previous Menti question spoke about how much you felt potentially supporting volunteering, or your company supporting volunteering could work towards a better social equity. What we do in the foundation at Zurich is we match fundraising. So all employee fundraising is matched 100%, therefore doubling the impact that a donation would have. And we also incentivize volunteering through matching. So the more employees in a business unit that volunteer, the higher the charitable donation that is made at the end of the year to a local charity.
Sorry, Ruth, can I ask you then, so how many days a year do you...
Yep. So
yeah.
across Zurich Group, it is a minimum of 1 day a year, and business units choose how much they do. So for example, in Turkey, they have 5 days a year. In the Isle of Man in the UK, there are 3 days a year. I'm sure Gabriella might be able to tell us later how many they have in Zurich, Krakow. But it really is up to the business unit. But Zurich completely has a minimum of 1. Okay,
and that's not something that's funded by the foundation. That's written into kind of work policies, yeah?
Correct, yeah. So that is from Zurich Group as opposed to the foundation. We just support that, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. And the other is, have we changed the slide or not? I missed whether...
We don't need to just yet.
Okay, right.
Cool,
okay.
Perfect. So our final mechanism through which we support our employees is through our local grants programme. So this is where we support business units and employees across the world in tackling local societal issues to enable social equity. So our local programmes initiative provides practical support and funding to help Zurich business units initiate long-term strategic relationships with local community organisations. So as of today, the foundation supports 30 local grant programmes worldwide. And all the programmes must align with the Zurich strategy as well as the foundation strategy, and engage employees through the donation of time and talent. So if this is something that your company is potentially interested in, it doesn't just have to be about physical funding. It can be about what we call skills-based volunteering. So what can the skills that you have through working in your particular company do to benefit those within the community? We also include in-kind donations of our products and use of our premises, facilitating introductions for supported organisations to our wider business networks, again, creating that coalition of the willing and making those connections where possible, and seconding our employees to help address identified gaps, or even encouraging senior Zurich employees to accept positions on boards or committees of organisations we work with. So our local grant programmes are developed in collaboration with local Zurich offices, hence why we said a local grant for a local need, as it's the local grant with our Zurich Business Services Centre in Krakow that I would like to speak to you about today. So on the next slide, what we can see is some of the research that went into the decision making for the Business Service Centre in Krakow. So the service centre in Krakow has been around since 2016, and in that time, its employee base has grown and it has made a real impact in the Zurich business. They have always been an active business unit when it came to community investments, engaging through community days, fundraising campaigns, skills-based volunteering and community outreach. So as with all our local grant programmes, the initial impetus comes from the Zurich business unit. And Zurich Krakow wanted to make a bigger difference in their community, and they began to identify a cause by engaging their employees. So on the screen, you can see some of the data that went behind the decision-making process with the Zurich Krakow office. And what they were looking at there was the Gender Equality Index. And this is obviously the most up-to-date one, but they were looking at data from a few years ago. And with over 70% of the staff in the Krakow Business Services Centre being female and well-educated with a master's degree, this cause really resonated with the employees, and extensive employee feedback showed strong support for women who are victims of domestic abuse. So the business unit then began identifying a charitable partner that aligned with their cause, and they had the structure, also looking for the charitable partner that had the structure and governance to generate the positive impact appropriately. So they formed a relationship with the Women's Rights Centre, with CPK, and began to co-create a local grant submission. So on the next slide, we can start to see what came of that submission. So in 2019, the Zurich Foundation committed to a 5-year grant of over $1 million in collaboration with the Zurich Business Service Centre in Krakow and CPK. So with this grant, the Zurich Foundation and the Business Service Centre and CPK take a stand for women in need, and they are established or have established a new Women's Rights Centre in Krakow. Now, the centre was based upon other centres, as you may well know, that CPK have across Poland. And what the funding has really enabled CPK to do is, like I say, expand that network of centres and expand the impact and positive work that they do. So one aspect of the cooperation is also establishing the basis of a sustainable funding model for the centre in the future. So employees as well at the Zurich Business Service Centre and a really core part of the grant, because the grant has been built from the ground up with the employees in Krakow. What a crucial part is that they continue that engagement, they continue to volunteer, they continue to get involved with the charity, whether it be through fundraising or skills-based volunteering. And as we can see in some of the photos there, as part of the renovation, Zurich Krakow staff were there helping out and ensuring that the building was ready to open for women that needed to use its services. So the centre also leads awareness and training sessions for employees at the services centre, and helping them to spot signs of abuse and provide on advice on how to support friends and family they may be suspected victims as well. So the final piece I wanted to talk about was actually how we measure the success of such a grant moving forward. So on the next slide, what we talk about is actually our impact measurements. So we measure impact in 3 ways. We measure connected, positively impacted and transformed lives. So the Zurich Foundation's aim is by 2024, we want to create transformative change in the lives of more than 1 million vulnerable people and positively impact the lives of 10 million others. And our main mechanism for doing that is through our local grant programme. So the precise definition of connected, positively impacted and transformed is defined again in partnership with the charitable organisation and the business unit to make it again a sustainable way moving forward. We also collect qualitative data in the form of impact stories. And so these can be from service users or employees who have felt the impact of the programme firsthand. So we believe that our role goes beyond just providing funding to the charitable organisations we support, but we aim to build a trusted relationship with them and be an active enabler and collaborator. So it's by mutualising our expertise, again, that coalition of the willing, that we can maximise our overall impact. So the COVID-19 pandemic really exposed many vulnerabilities and increased social inequalities, just as Monika said earlier. And all components of human development, so education, health and living standards that were all covered in the research by State Street, are negatively impacted. It's more important than ever that we continue our work in this space. And so through our programmes, we're supporting Zurich business units across the world in tackling these local issues. And that's why it's so crucial that it is the business units themselves that bring forward these issues to us to help support them. So we're building or trying to build platforms for those without a voice. So to drive social equity, we aim to empower people, giving them the tools and resources to take control of their future, so we can have a more significant and long-lasting impact on both them and society at large. So very quickly to finish, if you would like to find out any more about our local grants or the process that we follow, if anything has inspired you or intrigued you as to how you would maybe like to get involved, please feel free to reach out to me. On the next slide, there's some foundation, Zurich Foundation contact information, or please feel free to reach out to myself on LinkedIn, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. That's terrific. Thank you very much, and thank you for. I know you kind of sped through that, right? So, so even so, we are kind of like out of time, right? Is Gabriella there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Gabriella. Hi. So do you just want to say who you are? Because
well, I'm representing today the Zurich based in Krakow Center. I'm a finance manager and cooperating with Zurich since 5 years right now. And
okay, so I've got a question for you, and we have to be really quick, right?
Sure.
Because we've only got 7 minutes left. So, I mean, the question is, so what difference has the grant made to you as employees? Let's start with that one, maybe.
Yeah, so we started our journey with CPK in January 2019 when we applied to Zurich Foundations with the business plan with opening CPK in Krakow. The primary intention was to get the funds to help CPK to open the shelter in Krakow. Since then till now, we managed to support CPK in every single step they were taking to be at the current position, simply to be on the Krakow market. We are proud to be part of this initiative, supporting women in need. And the mission, it's simply in line with our Zurich fundamental values. So from the beginning, we believe that every effort that we, like whole team members, all employees are taking, it's the right way to do so. We engage our team members in various initiatives, also like Ruth mentioned. We were starting really from the scratch, facilitating marketing materials, organizing promotions event, open days, sharing information and spreading awareness of a newly open initiative in Krakow.
Okay, I'm sorry to drop this on you.
Yeah.
Okay, But so I'm just thinking, what are the challenges, right? I mean, we've been going through the pandemic, so presumably that created some kind of challenge, right?
Yeah.
And,
during tough pandemic times, we were able to support CPK by conducting online trainings, especially Excel, Zoom application, and so on. Also, some HR tips, how to write a CV, and so on.
And what about? Sorry, I was just going to say though, but what about the impact on employees? I mean, was there? I mean, again, because everybody's kind of not working in the office, right? So, was it an outlet for people?
So it was difficult because we need to rearrange the actions required from them. So instead of asking them to go and clean premises or do the painting in the renovation area, we asked them to focus on the online support. And it turned out that this process of digitalization requires sometimes help, how to learn to navigate the tools and so on. And here our team members, our employees were really supportive.
Okay, great stuff. And one final thing from me. So this is a Zurich initiative, but can anybody join you?
Yes, of course. You can join from every single point in time and place and company. You can reach out to me or to Ruth or directly to CPK. Every single help is needed.
Thank you, because I can see, so Anna in the chat has said that State Street supports CPK in Gdansk, right? So,
yeah.
And to a point that Ruth made about the skills that we can donate, not just the money, you know, I mean, just talking about Krakow, 100,000 people with fabulous skills, right? So there's so much that we can contribute. Look, we always run out of time with these things. I'm really sorry about that. We gave ourselves 15 more minutes than normal. But we've still kind of run out of time. I'd like to leave the last word, if I can, to Monika and to Ruth. Just before I do, I'm just going to read out just a few things, right? I really wanted to come to your questions, but I just want to say, you know, from Julita, we've had fabulous presentation. Thank you. Isabella, thank you for great events. Aga, thank you for the presentation, great materials. Eleanor, thank you for the session. Masha, thank you for the presentation. Nina, thank you for the presentation, etc. Maria, I really like State Street series in Vysokia or Casa magazine. So I think it's been a great event. I'm sorry that we've run out of time. We clearly have to do more. Last words with Ruth and Monika. So Ruth, maybe you first.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to echo what Gabriella said, please, if anybody does have any further queries or questions or they want to get involved, just reach out to any of us. We'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction. And it really is about, like the title of it was, you know, a local grant for local need. The research conducted by State Street that Monika took us through clearly shows, you know, the pandemic has exacerbated that need, and it really is time for us all to come together and act in the ways that we can. We don't need one person doing this perfectly. We need everybody doing it imperfectly to create that impact. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Thank you. Thanks, Ruth, and thank you, Gabriella. Monika, last word is with you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I'd like to thank everyone for participation, and I think we are all very inspired, and lots of new ideas came to my mind while listening to Ruth and potentially, you know, even reviewing the research results again and again. I just wanted to say that we as companies and representatives of our businesses, we still have lots of work to do. And I strongly believe that we can really contribute to our societies, to our communities, and among ourselves. And definitely, some of you have been informed that we are planning to have task forces and go deeper into diversity aspects and topics and look at it. What else we can do as employers? What else we can do as colleagues to make people, you know, be more effective, more happy at work, and develop themselves. And this will be all about disability inclusion, LGBT, interculturalism, more on gender, and hopefully more topics to come. So feel free to reach out as well, connect with us on LinkedIn. As Ruth mentioned, we are very happy to get connected. Thank you.
Thank you, Monika. Thank you very much. So from me, thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you. Particular thanks to Monika and the team at State Street, and to Ruth and the team at Zurich for your support in putting this event together. This isn't the last time you're going to hear from us on this topic, as Monika said. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and of course we will be making the presentation available to everyone. Thank you very much.